Acquired hemolytic anemia. Hemolytic anemia is a disorder in which the red cells are destroyed faster than they can be made. The destruction of red cell is called hemolysis. This hemolytic anemia can be of inherited and acquired origin. Inherited hemolytic anemia happens when parents pass the gene for the condition onto their children. Two common causes of this type of anemia are sickle cell anemia and thalassemia. Sickle cell anemia we have already discussed. These conditions produce red cells that do not live as long as the normal red cells, which live for 120 days or more. Acquired hemolytic anemia is something, it's not something that you are born with. So it occurs, this condition develops later on. Your body makes normal red blood cells, but later on they get destroyed. Now coming to the causes of acquired hemolytic anemia. Acquired hemolytic anemia are caused by a variety of extrinsic factors, namely antibodies like immunohemolytic anemia. There are also isoimmune hemolytic anemia and drug-induced immunohemolytic anemia. Okay. There can be some mechanical force which causes microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, direct toxic effects in malaria, Clostridial infection, acquired membrane abnormalities in paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, and splenomegaly. If you remember the classification we had in the class of hemolysis, it is divided into acquired and hereditary. In hereditary, I have taken the topic of sickle cell anemia. Now, continuing with this, I will be finishing the acquired first and then going back to the hereditary. So, I am completing the acquired today. So, coming to the first is immunohemolytic anemia. Immunohemolytic anemia are a group of anemias occurring due to antibody production by the body against its own red cell. Immune hemolysis may be induced by the following three types of antibodies. First being the autoimmune hemolytic anemia, characterized by formation of autoantibodies against patient's own cells. An autoantibody is an antibody produced by the immune system that is directed against one or more of individual's own RBCs. So these are again normal RBCs. Depending upon the reactivity of the autoantibody, the autoimmune hemolytic anemia is further divided into warm type AIHA and cold type AIHA. The warm type happens, these autoantibodies are reactive at body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius and cold antibody is at 4 degrees Celsius. So this is number 1. Number 2 is your drug-induced immunohemolytic anemia. Number 3 is your isoimmune hemolytic anemia, in which the antibodies are acquired by transfusion, pregnancy and hemolytic disease of the newborn. So, immunohemolytic anemia is a group of anemias due to production of antibodies. What are these antibodies? One is autoimmune hemolytic anemia because of autoantibodies. Second is drug-induced. Third one is isoimmune. So, starting with autoimmune hemolytic anemia. So in that we are going to see the warm antibody first. So the pathogenesis is most common. This is one of the most common type of immunohemolytic anemia. Most common antibodies are IgG class, sometimes IgA, but mostly IgG. Warm antibodies reactive at body temperature, optimally at 37 degrees Celsius. Okay. So conditions predisposing to autoimmune hemolytic anemia under warm antibodies are: first is some idiopathic, we do not know the causes. In some case of lymphomas and leukemias, in vascular, collagen vascular diseases, some drugs like methyl dopa, penicillin, quinidine and post-viral. So, coming to the pathogenesis. Here IgG antibodies that react with antigens are called Rh antigens, which are present on the surface of the red blood cells. This reaction triggers a process called antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity. Due to this, immune cells like macrophages, neutrophils and NK cells or CD8 plus T cells bind to the Fc portion of the antibody via a cell membrane receptor called the Fc receptor. Once bound, this leads to hemolysis of the red blood cells. This hemolysis can take place in two forms: via direct cytotoxin like superoxide granules from the neutrophils, most commonly via phagocytosis by macrophages, which occurs in the spleen. The spleen is the major site of red cell destruction in warm antibody AIHA. So, what happens is, if you see a red cell, okay, so what happens is, when an antibody, so I'll be drawing over here, you have a red cell. So normally over a red cell you have an antigen. Here the antigen which you have, is your RH antigen. Multiple antigens are there, but here we are going to consider the RH antigen. So what happens is, in warm, due to the causes which you have seen, it can be unknown, there can be lymphoma, there can be drug induced, due to stress induced. So due to many causes, here what happens is, in a normal red cell which has R antigen, okay, now what happens is, an IgG antibody will come, because the immune response sees some abnormality and produces an IgG antibody, okay. So this IgG antibody will react with the RH antigen present on the red blood cell, okay. So there will be a process when these come together. So when this antibody and antigen react, you have an antibody dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity, okay. Due to this, what happens, your macrophages will come, your neutrophils will come, your NK cells will come, your CD38 T cells will come, okay, CD8 plus T cells will come. So what happens is, all this reaction will take place against this one RBC with RH antigen, okay. Now, so most important is your macrophages. So here what happens is, if you see, this have an Fc receptor site, okay. This Fc receptor site will bind to the Fc portion that is present on the antibody. So now what happens, an antigen antibody reaction occurs. So at this, what happens, you can have phagocytosis. Most important is your phagocytosis. In phagocytosis, what happens, because in the macrophages you see this antibody antigen reaction occurs, that is why your RBCs break down. This breakdown RBCs happen in your spleen, okay. So phagocytosis is most important and most common way where hemolysis occurs, okay. And the second one is because of the neutrophils. What happens when neutrophils come in contact with this antigen antibody reaction, there will be superoxide granules produced, okay. So you can see superoxide granules are produced. These granules are harmful to the red cell membrane, and these will now break the RBCs, leading to hemolysis, okay. So what we need to know is, you have a RBC, an affected RBC which has an RH antigen. Immune system will produce an IgG. So this is an IgG antibody. This IgG antibody, when it reacts, it forms an antibody dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity. So what happens is, now macrophages, this will cause the macrophages, neutrophils, NK cells, CD8 plus T cells all to come together. In that, macrophages is the first to attack. Here what happens is, you have the Fc receptor of the macrophages which will bind to the Fc portion of the IgG. Here an antigen antibody reaction occurs. This antigen antibody reaction that is phagocytosed by the macrophages. Here the RBCs are broken down. Broken RBCs cause hemolysis, and all this process occurs inside the spleen. The second is the neutrophils. This neutrophils cause hemolysis by production of superoxide granules, okay. So we need to know, spleen is the major site for red cell destruction, okay. So kindly remember this picture, it's very important. Clinical features. Warm antibody AIHA can occur at any age and in either sex. The disease tends to have remission and relapses. The usual clinical features are chronic anemia of varying severity. There can be remission or there can be relapse. Splenomegaly, occasionally hyperbilirubinemia. So, what do we see? Initially, because it occurs late after birth, so it does not occur through. Because of birth, it does not occur, it occurs later throughout the period. So, you can say it occurs after 7, 8 or even after 15, 20, in the late 40, 50 years, it can occur. So, here what happens is initially when your red cells start to break, you know the compensatory mechanism, initially you will not have anemia, but this anemia will gradually increase as the number of RBCs are getting destroyed. So in that, so you will have minimal RBC breakdown, initially no symptoms. Later on, what happens as the hemoglobin keeps getting destroyed, what and all can happen. So initially what happens, you can have tiredness, dizziness, shortness of breath, tachycardia. Okay, so these are the symptoms that we see in anemia. Later on, when massive red blood cell rupture is occurring, hemoglobin breaks down, you will have high bilirubemia, high bilirubin. This bilirubin now will get deposited in the skin, eyes and urine. So you can have jaundice. This mostly is unconjugated jaundice. And most important is your enlarged spleen, because higher the hemolysis, that is breaking down the RBC, bigger is the size of the spleen. Okay. Laboratory findings. The hematological and biochemical findings are mild to moderate chronic anemia, reticulocytosis, prominent spherocytosis, which we will see in the peripheral blood film, unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. In severe cases, hemoglobinemia and hemoglobinuria will be seen. Positive direct Coombs test will show the presence of warm antibodies on red cells, which is detected at the temperature 37 degrees Celsius. Positive indirect Coombs test at 37 degree may indicate presence of large quantities of warm antibodies in this serum. So what happens is, if you take a complete blood count, in complete blood count, what you will see, the hemoglobin has fallen down, MCV, HCS values have fallen down. In reticulocytosis, what happens is, reticulocytosis, these are large cells, so because this MCH and MCV can be increased. Spherocytosis, because what happens here, because of the reaction, and because of the reaction, what you can have, antigen antibody reaction, your RBCs can be broken down. This breakage of these RBCs looks like spears, so these are spherocytosis in shape. Unconjugated bilirubemia, if you can see here, if you are revisiting this page, you remember hemoglobin, this hemoglobin breaks down into hemoglobin. The heme part becomes bilirubin, which enters the liver. In liver, it enters as an unconjugated. When you have high amount of bilirubin, this will enter all the other places, okay, which will cause jaundice. Now, see, in severe cases, you always know in intravascular hemolysis what happens, and some amount of extravascular hemolysis, you can have hemoglobinemia, hemoglobinuria. This happens when you have a lot of heme left in the body and there are not enough haptens, okay, haptoglobins. Now, what is these Coombs test? Let us discuss the Coombs test, okay. So, I am just showing. This is a bone marrow. In this bone marrow, what happens? Reticulocyte, because compensatory blood loss, reticulocyte stage will increase. So you have lot of reticulocytes. These reticulocytes are initially immature red blood cells. So these immature red blood cells, what will happen? Because of their immaturity, they can cause hemolytic anemia. Okay. So you see spherocytes. These are spear-shaped cells. These are round. Okay. So spherocytosis, you can see no central pillar and smaller than RBCs. Okay, so if you see a normal RBC, these are much smaller, rounder, no central pillar is there. Okay, if you remember, see, RBC breakdown, globin in heme, globin goes back. Where is the hemoglobin? Hemoglobin becomes bilirubin. This bilirubin has unconjugated form with albumin enters the liver. Here what happens? Unconjugated becomes conjugated. Okay, this conjugated will go via the bile duct and enter in by, there will be some bacterial process in the small intestine where it becomes urobilinogen. This urobilinogen enters the large intestine and is excreted out as stercobilin in the feces. Okay, Now, some amount of urobilinogen will also enter via the portal vein. So this is an intrahepatic circulation. Okay, so this enters back, and some amount of urobilinogen will be excreted in the urine. So what happens is, if you have excess of heme, so excess of heme comes through this can lead to hemoglobinuria. Okay, now what happens is this, if there is an issue here where the heme cannot be broken down to bilirubin, here what happens, you can have hemolytic jaundice. Okay, hemolytic jaundice can occur, you can have hepatocellular jaundice, you can have obstructive jaundice. Here most important is a hemolytic jaundice, okay, due to excessive breakdown of RBCs. Now coming to Coombs test. In Coombs test, you need to know why Coombs test is important, and it is an important diagnostic tool in all cases of immunohemolytic anemia. Okay, so this Coombs antiglobin test is your direct and indirect Coombs test. Now coming to direct Coombs test. Direct Coombs test also is referred as direct antiglobin test. Is used to detect if antibodies or complement system factors have bound to RBC surface antigen in vivo. Detect antibodies or complement system bound to RBC surface in vivo. So this is an important MCQ. Okay, the patient's RBCs are washed. When they are washed, it helps to remove patient's own serum. So if you remember, if you keep blood standing in a test tube, you will have different parameters. You will have RBC which lies below, you will have plasma and serum that floats to the up. Okay, that yellowish plasma, whitish yellowish plasma with serum has been removed. So now they are centrifuged with anti-human globulins, which are also known as Coombs reagent. If immunoglobulin or plate complement factors have been fixed on the RBC surface in vitro, the anti-human globulin will agglutinate the RBCs and the direct Coombs test will be positive. So for the Coombs test to be positive, you need to know there needs to be agglutination. Now, direct Coombs test is used in immune-mediated hemolytic anemia, hemolytic disease of newborn, in RHD hemolytic disease of newborn, ABO hemolytic disease of newborn, drug-induced immune-mediated hemolysis mismatch transfusion reaction. Okay. So in direct Coombs test, we take patient's component. So in patient's component, what happened? We take the patient's blood, it is washed, serum is removed, so we see the RBCs. If this patient has autoimmune hemolytic anemia, then antibodies will be attached to the surface of the RBCs. To this we will add a reagent. This reagent is your Coombs reagent, also known as anti-human globin, okay, which also look like antibodies. Okay. So now what happens is, now when we add them together, we see this agglutination occurring. So what happens is, you see the RH antigen will now join to the heads, to the tails of this immunoglobulins or antibodies that are present on the surface of the red blood cells. So this agglutination occurs and there is clumping. Okay, when there is agglutination clumping, this is a positive test. So anti-RBC antibody are present. Okay, now if no agglutination seen, you see there is no clumping, so there is negative. So anti-RBC antibodies are absent. Okay, again we take the patient's blood. In this blood we remove the serum, we only take the RBCs. In this RBCs, the blood sample of the patient with immune-mediated hemolytic anemia is taken. Antibodies are shown attached to the antigen on the surface of the RBCs. So you can see these are the chotu antigen. To this antigen, you have the antibodies that are attached to the surface of the RBC. Now, to this we will add the Coombs reagent, okay, and intubate it. So after intubation, what happens is, what you will see, the RBC agglutinate. The anti-human antibodies form links between the RBCs by binding to the human antibodies on the RBC. So you can form link formation and agglutination. Okay. So this agglutination causes positive test results. Now coming to indirect Coombs test. Here what happens is, it is also referred as indirect antiglobin test. Is used to detect in vitro antibody antigen reaction in the serum. Used for detection of very low concentration of antibodies present in the patient's plasma serum prior to blood transfusion. So we do Coombs test before blood transfusions. Why? Because it will help us not give wrong blood to the wrong patient. So this is done. In antenatal care, indirect Coombs test is used to screen pregnant women for antibodies that may cause hemolytic disease to the newborn. Compatibility test and antibody identification. Now coming to the indirect Coombs test. So here we have taken patient's component. So the difference between direct and indirect is, in direct we used to take the blood sample. From the blood sample we used to remove the serum. But here we are taking the patient's serum. Okay, we are not taking the blood as such, we are taking the serum. So we are taking the patient's serum which can have antibodies. Okay, so with that we add a patient's donor blood. Okay, and after that we add the Coombs reagent. So we let them incubate, and after incubation what do we see? If we see the RBC, the donor RBCs have reacted along with the antibodies present from the patient, and with that Coombs reagent has also interacted. So now clumping occurs, there is agglutination. So this is a positive indirect Coombs test. So it's an anti-donor RBC antibody present. Okay. Now if there are no antibodies in the patient's serum, there will be no clumping seen over here. So this is the negative test. Okay. So once again, an indirect Coombs test, what happens? We take a patient's serum, okay, which can have the antibodies. In this what happens? The donor's blood sample is added to the tube with the serum of the patient. Now antigen antibody complexes are formed. Then we add the Coombs reagent. After that, if there is interaction between the antigen antibody complex and the Coombs reagent, what will happen? You will have a positive agglutination. So agglutination is there, it's a positive test. So the difference we need to remember are, in direct and indirect what happens? In direct detects antibodies on the surface of the RBCs. In indirect detects antibodies in the serum. This is in the surface of the RBC, this is in the serum. So what we do in here, we take the blood without the serum. Here we take only the serum. Add patient's RBC to the Coombs reagent. Here again we add the patient's plasma to the RBCs, okay, with the known antigen. Then Coombs reagent is added. Okay. So in indirect there is an extra step. We take the patient's serum, that is also known as plasma, to this RBCs of with the known antigen with the recipient is added, and then Coombs reagent is added. Okay. So if agglutination occurs, in both there will be positive tests. So what are the uses of direct test? It is used for autoimmune hemolysis, warm and cold, and drug-induced hemolysis, and alloimmune hemolysis. In alloimmune hemolysis, you have hemolytic disease of the newborn, alloimmune hemolytic transfusion reaction. Indirect Coombs tests are used in pre-transfusion testing, that is blood types and cross-matching, and prenatal antibody screening. IgG antibody that can cross the placenta. Okay, so both have the uses and both have an extra step, and one important factor is this detects antibodies on the surface of the RBC. Here detects the antibodies in the serum. So what are the samples we are going to take? In this patient we are going to take blood sample. Here we are going to take the blood sample and we are going to take out the serum. Only the RBCs are required. Here if we take the blood also, we are going to discard the RBCs, but we are going to take only the serum from the patient. Okay, but when we take from the donor, we are going to take the RBCs. Okay. Now I have added a video of Coombs test so you can see and understand. Now coming to the treatment. Now we finished the test, finished the clinical features. Now coming to treatment of warm antibody AIHA. Here the treatment of these cases consists of removal of the cause. So that can be whatever the cause. It can be idiopathic, where we do not know. In that cases we give corticosteroid therapy. In some cases where it is due to some some infections or blood parasites, where we can remove the blood parasites by drugs and then give in severe cases we can give blood transfusion. Splenectomy is a second line treatment. Why splenectomy? Because massive hemolysis. If we take out the spleen, what happens? Then the process of hemolysis can be reduced. Okay. Now coming to warm antibody AIHA. In warm antibody AIHA, you will have cold agglutinin disease, which can be acute or chronic. Acute is due to mycoplasma infection, mononucleosis. Chronic can be idiopathic without a cause, lymphomas, and it can be because of some parasitic infections, which can be mycoplasma infection, viral flu, measles, mumps, and syphilis. Okay, pathogenesis. Antibodies which are reactive in cold temperatures can induce hemolysis under two conditions. First is cold agglutinin test and paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. So in cold agglutinin test, the antibodies are IgM, that was IgG, here it is IgM type, which binds to the red cells at 4 degrees Celsius, that was 37 degrees Celsius. These cold antibodies are usually directed against I antigen on the red cell surface. Agglutination of the RBC by IgM cold agglutinin is most profound at very low temperature, but upon warming up to 37 degrees Celsius or more, the disagglutination occurs very quickly. Hemolytic effect is mediated through fixation of C3 to the red blood cells and not agglutination alone. Most cold agglutinins affect juvenile, that is a new, from immature to mature, just new cells, juvenile red blood cells. The etiology of cold antibody remains unknown. It is seen in certain infections like Mycoplasma pneumonia, infectious mononucleosis, and in lymphomas. In paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria, what happens is the cold antibody is IgG antibody, that is IgM, now again IgG, that is also known as Donat Lannister antibody, which is directed against P blood group. Here you have an I antigen, here you have the P blood group antigen. So I antigen, P antigen, and brings about complement mediated hemolysis. Attacks on paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria are precipitated in cold temperature. Paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria are uncommon and can be seen associated with tertiary syphilis or as a complication of infections like mycoplasma. So mycoplasma pneumonia here, mycoplasma pneumonia over here. Flu see there is flu over here. You can have measles and mumps, which are very common in your young children. Okay. Now coming to the pathogenesis. In pathogenesis of cold autoimmune hemolytic anemia, the primary red cell have antigens I and P. Okay, the antibodies are IgM class, so IgM class will add on. So here the chronic form of the disease, which is most common, the chronic form is the most common. Hemolysis primarily occurs in the liver via the complement system. The complement system is a group of plasma protein that act together to destroy the pathogens. Specifically, IgM activates the classical complement pathway, and the complement protein assemble into MAC. So what happens is when IgM antibodies come in contact with surface antigens. Here the surface antigen is I and P. So if I is seen in cases of, where do you see? You see P in cases of paroxysmal chronic hemoglobinuria. This is seen in cold agglutinin. Okay, cold agglutinin causes. So here what happens is because of this antigen antibody reaction, you will have a complement pathway gets activated. Because of this, what happens, your C3 will come into play. If C3 come into play, this will lead to formation of MAC. MAC is a membrane attack protein. Membrane attack protein will attach to a bacterial cell or the RBCs here. When it attaches, it will form a pore in the RBCs. Because of this, you will have hemolysis. So this MAC drills a hole in the RBC surface, which results in RBC destruction. In acute form of the disease, it occurs intravascularly in toes. So the chronic form is this. In acute form, what happens? You will have intravascular hemolysis in the toes, in the fingers. This is known as Raynaud's phenomenon. Here the tiny capillaries of the toes, fingertips are blocked by microemboli. Means a small plaque can block them, which turns the skin of the foot and fingers to turn purple or blue. Now, coming to the clinical features. The clinical features are due to hemolysis, okay, not due to agglutination. So there was agglutination, here there is hemolysis. This includes chronic anemia, which worsens by exposure to cold, Raynaud's phenomenon, cyanosis affecting the cold exposed regions like tip of nose, ears, fingers and toes. So whichever surface is extreme to the outside of the body, in the peripheries, are more affected. Hemoglobinuria occurs on exposure to cold temperature. So what do we see? If you see a person's hand, you see a patient's hand, you see clear tips, but here you can see purplish yellow discoloration. Okay, so this is your Raynaud's phenomenon. Okay, so you can see these are the blood vessels which gets blocked due to emboli. Because this microemboli, what happens, the blood vessels are narrowed, so blood does not go through to the tips. If it does not go through the tips, what will happen? You will have purplish discoloration of the tips of the finger. That's the same for your nose and ears and toes. You can see tongue is discolored, lips are discolored, fingers are discolored, nails are discolored, and that is also in dark purplish bluish color. This is signs of cyanosis. So what happens? You know that these people can have hemoglobinuria and hemosideruria. So intravascularly, what do we see? All this broken heme and hemosiderin passes through the kidney. As it passes through the kidney, will cause hemoglobinuria, hemoglobinemia, hemoglobinuria and hemosideruria, which damages the kidney and leads to kidney damages, kidney insufficiency. In these patients, what do we see? You see normal serum and patient serum. Okay, so you can see this is hemoglobin. You will have hemoglobinemia. See, you can see how much a normal serum looks like. In normal serum, you can see so much serum is there, and these are your dark RBCs. But here you see it has reduced, and there is lot of serum. You see patients normal urine. Here you see patients normal urine after centrifugation. If you see this in your PPTs, it is red in color, so that is much better. Here, since it is less because of the printer ink, these look yellow, but this is all blood. Okay, this is all blood. So lot of blood is your hemoglobinemia. In urine, it is hemoglobinuria. So what happened? These are your RBCs, dead RBCs. These are your dead RBCs. Okay, but this is all red in color. Coming to laboratory findings. In laboratory findings, what you will see? Hematological and biochemical findings we are going to see. Now, mostly it is same between the cold and the warm. Okay, so you can have chronic anemia, you can have low reticulocyte count, because young red cells are affected, that is juvenile red cells are affected in warm. You can have spirocytosis, which is less marked. Okay, you can have, if you do direct positive test, if you do a direct positive Coombs test for detection of C3 on the red cell surface, but IgM responsible for C3 coating on the red cell is not found. Okay, so what happens in cold antibody? If you remember, in cold antibody, what happens is you have IgM, which reacts with I antigen and P antigen. This leads to complement pathway activation, which activates the C3. Okay, now what happens is, what you will see if you do a positive direct Coombs test, in here you will see the C3 that is on the RBC surfaces, but IgM that is responsible for this to occur might not be found. So what you're going to see, we can see a lot of C3, but IgM we might not find that much. Okay, the cold antibody titer is very high at 4 degrees Celsius and very low at 37 degrees Celsius. Donat-Lannister test. If you do this test, what happens? You take the blood sample of a patient at 4 degrees centigrade and we warm it up to 37 degrees Celsius. So what happens? The agglutination will vanish, the hemolysis will vanish. Okay, so the IgM class cold antibody has specificity for I antigen, while rare IgG is for the P antigen. So what happens is, IgM is for I and IgG is for P. Okay, I'm sorry I missed this point where explaining the pathogenesis. IgM binds to I antigen and IgG binds to P antigen. Okay, so you can see this is the surface protein which has the C3 handler of the complement. So what happens? The antibodies can link to it, and this linking is because of IgM. This IgM is due to, here you have an antigen called I antigen. Okay, So IgM will bind to I antigen, okay, and this will activate your C3. C3 activates, so what will happen? This will lead to hemolysis occurrence. Okay. Now, what are the treatment? Treatment includes number 1, mild to moderate hypothermia. For cold antibody, what do? Is we try to reduce the heat loss. How we reduce the heat loss? We give additional clothing layers. We give them dry clothing. We increase physical activity. We take them to shelter. Now add fluid and fuel. So what we do? We add high carbohydrate diet. We add proteins. We add fat. Okay. We add lot of nutritious food, which can increase the body's temperature. We will give hot liquids like tea, milk, something hot water. What are the things we need to avoid is alcohol, no high caffeine. Okay, we can give warm water, but what happens most of the time, we tend to have hot coffee or hot water with us, hot tea with us, so we can offer it, but don't give a lot of caffeine, because a lot of caffeine can cause water loss. We need to avoid tobacco as well as nicotine. Add heat. How can we add heat? We can give them fire, usually by an external source. We can give them a heater, or we can burn some woods. Body to body contact can be given. Get into a sleeping bag. Dry clothing can be given, which can be light but should be drying. It should not be wet. And now in case of severe hypothermia, to reduce heat, we can give a hypothermic wrap. This is a hypothermic wrap. We apply heat pads and then we wrap up the patient. Okay. In this, one important condition is the patient should wear dry clothes, no wet clothes. Okay. We can add fuel and